So Project and Generation Entrepreneur, we have a lot of strong historic ties. The very first Generation Entrepreneur event was actually held at Project. One of the founders of Generation Entrepreneur was an ex-Project student, and so this family relationship really goes far, and lastly is part of the family. So, fourth year Business Information System student and graduated from Abbottsley. Anyone from Abbottsley? I didn't ask, anyone from NSB? No one from NSB? Crazy. Alright, so Abbottsley received the UNSW Business Information Systems Co-op and the UTS Business Information Technology Co-op. Worked at the Bank of Queensland, Deloitte, American Express, and now works for Microsoft as part of the education team. Really cool. And last, we have Blake, ex-Project student, also works for Generation Entrepreneur, first year data science student. So he actually graduated last year. Okay, so this is most fresh for Blake, actually. Received the UNSW Data Science Co-op Scholarship. He has yet to do his placement, so with all the other guys that have already kind of been through some of that industry placement, he hasn't been through it yet, but he will likely work for either PwC, Deloitte, JP Morgan, or a bunch of others. Okay, so that's kind of what we have in front of us. So you have everything printed out in front of you so that when it comes to question time, you can actually point at a particular person and try and talk about something specific that way. Okay, so I might hand it over to Andrew Stowe to kind of run us through the whole co-op thing.
Yep. Hey everyone, my name's Andrew, as Drew has so kindly introduced me as. So actually it wasn't too long ago I was sitting in these exact same seats in the chairs as a project student. And I remember thinking like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? And Asuru back then also motivated me to, think the bigger picture. Think about what you want to do later in life and think of everything as a stepping stone towards your dream career. And that's the same way I guess tell you to view co-op. Think of it as maybe taking 2 or 3 steps ahead towards where you want to be. Now, before I tell you exactly how the application process works, I want to tell you a bit about how the co-op program actually functions as an organization. So what you see is that you get a bunch of money from the university, but what actually happens is a company like Westpac or PwC pays the university for an intern for, say, 6 months. And through the university, which acts as this middleman, they'll, supposedly train you, get you ready for the industry, and place you at Westpac. So whenever you see that money, it's not the uni's money, it's some company's money, and they are expecting something out of it, in this case, work experience. So the way I break down the application process is into 3 steps. First, you got preparation, then you got the actual application, and then the interview stage. So if you think of the preparation stage, you have to really think about what you want to do. There's a lot of opportunities out there in a lot of different industries. And I'd say don't apply to everything, just pick the ones you're actually interested in. Co-op has a sort of problem where people actually start the program and then realize, oh, this isn't actually what I want to do anymore. I don't want to be an investment banker, I want to be in human psychology. And they end up swapping halfway through and it gets quite messy. I myself ended up dropping out of the UNSW co-op program to go work at a startup because I realized, oh, if I'm young, I really want to try to build a startup while I can. The corporates will always be there, but the startup, this opportunity might not be. So take a real long, hard think about what you want to do and choose carefully because there's a lot of opportunities out there, even once you start uni, not necessarily in co-op, but there'll be a bunch of other opportunities chucked at you. And co-op will restrict you in some situations. So make sure you research the program, if it's not a co-op program or a cadetship, and learn about the flexibility and what you actually have time for in the future. So you want to think of all the experiences you've had and sort of position yourself as the best candidate for what you're applying for. So if you're applying for a marketing position, you want to think of everything you've done and try make every experience you've had sort of marketing oriented. So if you're a school captain or if you're at the school canteen, think of how you can make it different. Make it different but also suit what you're applying for. So if you're applying for marketing, even if your role was just at a school canteen, you can just make it sound marketing interested. When people ask to buy stuff, I try to upsell them. I want them to, buy a hot dog and an ice cream. So things like that. These are little things that you're sort of positioning yourself, little experience that you're sort of positioning yourself, but it's almost like ammunition you can use throughout the application process. So throughout preparing, there are a bunch of extracurriculars that a lot of people prepare for. So you can have school captain, your sports captain, all sorts of things. But also think of the unique and quirky stuff that no one else has done, because that's what will set you apart. Now, before you even start applying for the co-op process, just put yourself into the shoes of the co-op office. They receive thousands of applications each year, and they don't have time to read all of them with all their brain power. they'll probably be going through real quickly. They have two paths, they accept the ones that go to the interview stage and the ones that get rejected. Their job at this stage in the application process is to reduce the number of interviews they have to do. So this means they're looking for really, really easy ways to cull you from the application process. And these can include spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes. So if you, just make sure you proofread your documents and make sure you actually, follow the rules. So if a question has a character count or a word count, make sure which limit you're actually applying for. I know people who misread something that said 300 character count as a 300 word count. So when they submit it, that means they're over the limit of that question. So then either their question gets cut off at half or they just get disregarded like that. And make sure you answer the question. So it's really easy to waffle. They're like, tell me about a situation where you've shown leadership. And then you go down this, spiral, this rabbit hole of just talking about stuff, but then in the end, you actually haven't told them about how you've shown leadership, you just told them about a situation. And a really easy way to, counter that is use a technique called STAR. It's a really, mainstream interview application technique, which stands for situation, task, action, and result. So you want to talk about the situation briefly, then the task you were actually trying to do, what you did, the action, and then the end result. So this is a really easy way to make sure you can use your experiences to actually illustrate or answer a question. Be as succinct as possible. Some people like to get really fluffy and just write. It's actually easier on the person who's reading an application if you're direct and straight to the point. And avoid reusing the same word over and over again. Don't keep saying, I learned this, I learned that. Change it up. This experience taught me about X and Y. So change your language a bit. Don't just have the same, template for every single question. Now, those are my main tips for the application process. Remember that their job is just to cull down the numbers so that their interviewers have to interview less. So if we go to the interview process, the way it works, or at least from my experience, was that you'd have someone from the uni and someone from the company that's sponsoring it. So for example, at my UTS interview, we had someone from the uni and someone from Lendlease. And at my UNSW co-op interview, we had someone from the uni, a professor, and someone from the RBA, Reserve Bank. So just keep that in mind when you get to the interview stage, that you are talking both to academia and industry. So this is the part of the application process where both the sponsor company, the person from industry, and the university wants to get to know you. There are a few, components recommendations that I'd suggest is be your authentic self, don't lie. So it's really easy to see through people when you're talking to them. You can sort of tell when they're just talking themselves up a bit too much, or if they're a bit quiet, they don't really know what you're thinking. Be your authentic self, and interviews are daunting. So if you haven't done much public speaking before, start practicing. Talk to a mirror. Get your family or friends to mock interview you. I'd even suggest recording a video interview of yourself, because when you watch it back, you might have some quirk that you don't notice yet. You might look to the left all the time, or you might jitter your hands. These are the subconscious things, or saying something like if you keep saying you only notice it when you really watch yourself over and over again. Prepare for tough questions. So expect questions like, tell me about yourself. These are the sort of questions that are most common for interviews. If you Google the top 10 interview questions, just practice with those, you'll be fine. Personally, I think there are two traits that the co-op office is looking for: confidence and commitment. So confidence. The reason I say this is because you're going to be representing the university at the sponsor company. So they want someone, who is able to hold a conversation, is able to represent the uni really well and not shy away from, tough or challenging experiences. And then commitment. Co-op is a 3 to 4 year program. Some, programs differ in terms of their rules, like cadetships. I'm not too sure on them. But make sure you're willing to commit to the program. So like I said before, a lot of people actually realize, this isn't something I want to do, and end up swapping out or dropping out of the program later on, which makes it really difficult for the office. It creates a lot more paperwork for everyone, because the sponsor company is expecting someone to show up, and then the co-op office has to organize a replacement last minute. So make sure you're willing to commit. And this is, I think, the number one thing that was, stressed to me in my interview. They're tell me about a time where you've shown commitment, stuff like that. They're really into this, characteristic. And at the end, they'll ask you if you have any questions for them. This is your opportunity to get to know them, but also for them to remember you. So the way, a lot of people have a bunch of questions that they come pre-prepared. The way I did it was I just tried to get to know the interviewers. So what got you into the RBA? Why are you in tech? And just keep following on from that. Do you have any, what would you tell yourself if you're my age to be doing? And then at the end, I would succinctly close the interview with something like, is there anything I should have asked? And the way I stood out, or I hope I stood out, was like, oh, can I add you on LinkedIn because I want to, stay in touch, stay connected, and network in the future. Stuff like that so that they remember you. Because in the interview stage, your job is just to keep your name in their minds. So I guess, thanks for listening. I hope you have questions. You got everyone here to answer them for you. And yeah, good luck.
Cool. Alright guys, what we'll do is this. Let's actually start by getting maybe each of the panelists to introduce themselves really quickly. And say maybe one thing that they found most rewarding. We'll try and keep it short so we can jump right into the questions, okay? But this is kind of a good way of, because none of us have actually been through that experience before. And I think probably no one in the room has even been through one of these interviews before or had any of those real life experiences. We can kind of hear what's one of the things that kind of stood out for each of these 4 people. So maybe we'll start with Andrew. I mean, Andrew's already introduced himself, so you know who Andrew is, but is there something that kind of, what stands out to you as something interesting in your experience, or something unexpected, or whatever?
I think the thing that stood out to me, especially going through this whole process, was just how small the world is, how everyone knows each other. So each of these programs have been running for decades now, and they have a really big alumni network. And you'd be surprised at just how many people know or were past co-op themselves. Like, you could go to any big company today and be like, oh, what did you do in uni? And they're like, oh, I did the co-op program back in 1995. And you're like, oh wow, like yeah, exactly. But also use that to your advantage, right? You can start connecting with people, even if you don't get in the co-op program. You can stay connected. You never know in the future if your paths will cross again.
I think where the co-op program kind of has the most value is probably early on in your uni career. When you go into university, you'll find that it's pretty hard to get industry experience. For the most part, if you do engineering, it's mandatory. You have to do 60 days of industry experience before you can even graduate, before you even qualify to graduate. And most people are scrambling to find that in their 3rd year. So, really, in first year, you'll have a placement, guaranteed, as part of co-op. So that's one of the most valuable things that you can get, is early sort of actual business experience. Reason being is because nobody is really hiring first years. You have to be insanely exceptional for them to even consider you in an application process, let alone hire you. But as part of the co-op program, you're going to have that opportunity. So
yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think a lot of engineering students, they don't realize how important the placement thing is, and it is mandatory. And UNSW, even though a lot of people talk about UNSW as one of the best universities for engineering, they don't really support you that much in helping you get that.
Yeah, exactly. You're expected to find your own sort of stuff, and like Asuri said, nobody really considers it until they need it to graduate. So you'll find that in 3rd year, everyone around you will be scrambling to apply for internships in all kinds of industries that they're not even really interested in, but you'll be sort of sitting there going, oh, 3 years ago, right? It's pretty valuable.
Elisha?
I think I just want to add as well, you were the only chemical engineering co-op, right? Yeah, so engineering's different, like it's extremely competitive, and like the fact that like you have that much experience in your first year, plus you're the only co-op in that year to get it, like puts you at an advantage like straight away. I think my most rewarding experience, like what I've learned the most from co-op has been what I don't want to do in the future. So I've completed, it's actually very helpful. Like, I think I've completed 3 internships now in like financial industry, consulting, etc. And I realized, like, I learned different things throughout each one, but I realized that I don't want to be like behind a computer screen, like coding, for example, which is something that Andrew would probably want to do, even though they're studying the same degree. So like that kind of experience tells you what you do want to do, and it really highlights your strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, I think that's the most rewarding.
Yeah. And that's actually a really common story. The number of people who've said to me, when they're in high school, I really want to be a doctor, or I really want to be a lawyer. And then, let's say they actually get into what they want to get into, and then, 4 years in, they're like, oh my goodness, I hate this world. And, you don't really know it until you try it. And I think co-op really gives you that opportunity. Blake?
Yeah, so I guess I haven't been at co-op for that long compared to these guys, but I think what I realized is just how diverse range of people you get to meet when you start the co-op program. your cohort really do become like your best friends throughout uni. And I don't know, before I sort of had this mind of sort of the stereotypical traits that a co-op scholar would have, I was a bit skeptical before I met them, but they're really diverse range of people from all sorts of different backgrounds. So I think that was really good for me.
Yeah, which is, when you think about high school, I think that we're actually exposed to a very limited kind of scope of people. Like we've become very used to being surrounded by a particular kind of person over the past 6 years. And I think as soon as you enter the workforce, you realize like just how small your bubble has been in a lot of ways. So I'll go through some of the main questions that we have here, and like I said, you guys are more than welcome to just interrupt at any point and take the conversation in a different direction, okay? So I think one of the big things that's on a lot of people's minds is this extracurricular thing, right? So I think, it might be that half the room here has actually got their academics down pat, like everything's great. But one of the big focuses in the application process is, well, what did you do outside of school, right? What did you do outside of school? And I think people would be curious to hear about what is it that you guys put into your applications, and what's your advice around extracurricular for the application process? Andrew?
Okay, I guess I'll start. I didn't really have so much, school extracurricular stuff, so I didn't really do any of the leadership stuff at school. Mine was really weird. I think for one of my questions I put that, I started modding Minecraft, and that was my experience of being curious, right?
Right.
Playing Minecraft and modding the game to do things I couldn't, that you're not normally able to do. And then something else I think I put was like, I was trying to play around with digital marketing, something like that. Because I applied for co-op at least for the information systems, IT, and marketing one. So I had to also, balance my application between the two. But there are preferences, so I put IT first and then marketing second. So I had to make most of my application towards IT, but in case I didn't get that, I also wanted to be considered for the other one. So I do want to chuck in a bit of marketing experience in there. So there was actually a really, finicky balancing game, but I had really weird, experiences which are non-traditional, which I hope made me stand out, because they always release statistics, I think, like, X percentage of school captains or something every year, and I didn't have any of that, so I just threw whatever I could in. Like, if you have a unique experience, just chuck it in, just make sure you position it so that it answers the question and, shows that you're actually a good candidate.
Which is really interesting, right? Because I think a lot of us don't even think about that. If you've been modding Minecraft, you probably wouldn't have thought about putting that into your application, because you always think about maybe you need to be a school captain, like you said, or like a prefect or whatever. Those are like the typical things, right? But actually, when you really think about it, right? When you really think about it, if you're applying for, let's say, a software company, what is it that they're actually, what is it that they're looking for? Are they looking for a school captain necessarily? Not necessarily. It shows leadership skills. It shows the ability for someone to be organized and to kind of communicate well with a bunch of people. But actually, for them, the skill set of being able to take a video game apart is actually kind of useful, and it means that you can be utilized from day one, as far as they're concerned, right? So you kind of need to think outside the bubble a little bit, I think. Lucas, extracurriculars. And also, again, if you were in a situation where it's like you didn't know much to put down, I think that'd be really interesting for some of us who maybe didn't really wanted to focus on studies for most of high school, and now all of a sudden they're asking extracurricular questions.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point before about sort of saying people don't even consider what extracurricular is. If you think about it, right, what does extracurricular mean? It means outside the curriculum, right? It means outside of what is set for you. So at the moment, you guys are all going to school. And if you're attending 6 hours a day, I hope, give or take, 5 days a week again. But that's not set by you. That's set by the government. That's set by your school. That's set by your parents. You don't, some of you might choose to do that. Okay, yeah, fair enough. You might love school, but at the end of the day, it's not you who's organising that. So what outside of that curriculum that is being set for you are you doing to be different, to be yourself, right? Or are you just part of the system? Because really, that's what they're looking for. Is they're not looking for academics, they're not looking for who they are, but not to the same degree they're looking for extracurricular, because they want to know what makes you tick as a person. What do you do that is unique to you and will add value that was transferable later on, right? So that's why they're looking for extracurricular, and they're not looking for titles, right? Extracurricular isn't a title. It's not things like, like Azura said, it's not the school captain, right? It's not I was a prefect, or I was this, I was that. Right? They're not looking for is this person a school captain. They're looking for is this person an effective leader? Do they have the ability to develop into situations that are going to be difficult and adapt and improvise and things like that. So when you consider your extracurricular activities, really think about what you've been doing and be proud of yourself, right? It might seem silly to you and easy to you, but the number of times that you've heard someone talk about something that they like doing, a hobby that they like doing, and you're like, oh, I can't do that. That sounds really hard. Oh, damn. I guarantee that somebody thinks the same thing about your hobbies, right? Especially if they don't know anything about it. So, in saying that, a lot of my sort of extracurricular stuff was typical.
However, my ones were.
Like things like prefect and volunteering and all that sort of stuff. They do go a long way, but they only go a long way if you can name and shame some experiences that you've had in those roles, right? You can't just be like, I was a senior prefect, that's my extracurricular. You have to say, okay, well, I was a senior prefect, but as part of a larger prefect team, we organized this. I took this problem and we came up with this solution, we facilitated the team, we took it to the school executive, and we said, okay, their school executive knocked it back initially, and then we sort of changed and tweaked the things that they had problems with, and then we took it back. Like, that shows initiative. That's the extracurricular component, not I was a prefect, right? Things like I think I did musical, like bands, fencing. I picked up fencing. Yeah, but again, that was probably one of the key parts of my application was fencing. Is something that I picked up in year 7 and then just kind of kept with it. And again, showing commitment, like Andrew said, to something that is new to you is a massive advantage.
Yeah, totally. And I think you kind of touched on something really interesting there. Is kind of like turning things into a bit of a story. Like people. I think these managers or these executives or whoever it is that's interviewing you or looking at these applications, they want to be able to think about whether you can be placed into a team and you can do great things inside of that team. So when it comes to, let's say you're a rugby player or whatever it might be, simply saying that you're a rugby player in and of itself doesn't have a lot of value. But to be able to draw from a story that shows that you either grew as a rugby player or something in that side, in that part of your life actually helped you develop yourself as a person, personal growth. If you can, and it doesn't have to be genuine. It shouldn't be too silly or too trivial.
Yeah.
But if it's if you have those things,
Andrew was sort of giving a good tip on that is the STAR response. So having a situation. I don't know what the other one said. But I know that's the typical way to showcase. That's the typical way to showcase that you've actually done a meaningful thing. Right. Another one that I heard someone applied for was like they were a mod on like some forum for like Magic the Gathering.
Sure.
Like that, okay, that's not what you probably think is an extracurricular activity, but to them, right, they invested a fair amount of time in sort of keeping the forums, under wraps and sort of keeping them controlled, which is like it's a hard thing to do on the internet, right?
Yeah.
If you can, it's up to you to frame how your experience shaped you or is going to be useful, but at the end of the day, you have control over that, and don't worry too much about what you put in the application, as long as you frame it well.
Yes, I would definitely say it's all about the way you express yourself. So the storytelling thing is huge. Even during the interview, they have your application printed out, and if they ask you questions, like don't necessarily say exactly like that, like a rehearsed story, but try and tell a story in the way that you express yourself. But yes, similarly, I was prefect, president of World Division, did Gold Jigabed, etc. But it did come down to the way that I spoke about each of these. I remember I really wanted to show my independence because I feel like that's something that I'm proud of. So I even talked about the fact that I got my learner's license, which everyone has, but it's the way you talk about it. The other thing I did, so I went to Abbotsleigh where technology isn't that big at my school. It was something that I never really thought about. Didn't really know how to code or anything, but I knew that I wanted to do technology at university just because I couldn't really believe that it was a degree because it just sounded so fun. So my way of showing my interest and my commitment to technology was in year 12 as procrastination, I built my own ATAL calculator. So that's something I spoke about, but that's Excel, anyone can do it on Excel. So even if you don't have the experience, you are in high school, they don't expect you to have years of experience. Once you're in university, now that we're applying for jobs, they will expect that of you. But as a high schooler, you just take what you have and then present it nicely.
Totally. And I think, what you're seeing is a bit of a common thread of like identifying either a problem or something in the real world and doing something with it, which I think a lot of us have done in some way, shape, or form, right? You might have to dig deep in your history to find that, but you've probably done something like that. And it's about telling the story around that and how that helped you grow in some way.
Yeah, just something really important that Lasha mentioned, they have your application there in front of them while they're interviewing them, right? So, a really good sort of way to judge whether something might be good on your application or not is, can I talk about this more? You don't have to put everything in the application. What you have to do is you have to make it interesting enough that they want to ask you more about it. And the only way that they're going to be able to ask you more about it is if they invite you for an interview,
Yeah,
right?
you won't have enough words.
So,
Yeah.
you're not going to have enough words to talk about every single thing that you ever did, but if you can kind of hint about and make it interesting enough to talk about, they're going to go, oh, well, actually that sounds really cool. Let's talk about it with this person. They're going to get you in for an interview, right? So think about what makes it interesting, and don't give away everything, but give away enough that they're going to want to ask you about. And make sure you can talk about it more, right? Don't put everything on the page, and then they go, so is there anything else you want to tell us? And you go, oh, no. It's all there. It's all there. You're gonna get shut down. So make sure you can talk about it more.
But extracurriculars.
Yeah, just before, I also want to add on about the application. My interview was just 30 minutes of just talking about one of my responses in the application. So make sure all your application responses are really solid and something that is intriguing as well, because obviously my interviewers are very interested in what I wrote there, so they wanted to talk about it. About my extracurriculars were all school oriented as well, but having said that, I just want to echo what these guys said. A lot of my first year club friends that I made, they just put stuff like part-time work in their applications about a time where I had to deal with a nasty customer. So yeah, they do look for behavioral stuff because like Elisha said, they understand that you're just high school students. They're not expecting some big achievements in your application. So just try to frame yourself as just a good person,
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's another thing, right? So your job, if you've ever worked anywhere, you probably have a bunch of stories that come from that. If you used to work at McDonald's or you currently work at McDonald's, literally every kind of person on the planet comes to McDonald's, right? So you've dealt with the entire spectrum of people, alright? So you probably have stories that you can draw from, right? And that way you can talk about how you deal with people, how you dealt with conflict or leadership, or whatever it might be. It doesn't sound like there would be something like that in a McDonald's role, but there totally is. And actually, a lot of companies really, for whatever reason, they really like seeing McDonald's on a resume. I've heard this from a lot of people. It's true. You
People are
wouldn't
willing to do shit work.
Exactly. You're gonna hustle every day for who knows how many hours per day and deal with shitty people all the
Especially
time.
town hall maccas on the time.
Right? And that's what they're kind of looking for.
I remember actually on that note, I spoke about in my interview, I spoke about the fact that I got rejected from McDonald's.
Right.
Yeah.
So you turned McDonald's into a story even though you didn't even get in.
Exactly.
Right?
It's McDonald's.
Yeah. So in summary of kind of that point there, this is about thinking outside the box as to what you can put down for extracurriculars. Yes, you know the mainstream stuff, and if you don't have the mainstream stuff, you could turn that into a strength. We're talking about something that is unusual and unique and memorable, right? And the other thing is the word story, right? So if you haven't written this in your notes already, write down the word story. Think about how it is that you communicate your ideas. Turn whatever event that you have in your mind that you're going to be talking about, turn it into a story, because people remember stories. It's a very easy way to remember you than remember your story. So next question. So Andrew's talked about. He gave a few tips as to how we went through the application process. And if anything else comes to mind, feel free to jump in as well. But I thought it'd be cool to get the other three to talk a bit about any tips that you guys have about the application process as well, and any kind of any tips to writing it or your approach with writing it, whatever it might be. Lucas, do you have any thoughts?
I think Andrew brought up a good point that your application has to be very clean. I think that's important. It reflects on how your application is a reflection of you, right?